Early Church Fathers, September 10th, Origen, De Principiis, on First Principles, Book 3, Chapter 2. Why the fight is real but ordered. I must speak plainly about the opposing powers and how they contend with us. From the beginning, Scripture shows the serpent seducing Eve, a creature animated by the devil's malice. I read of spirits that deceive, accuse, and destroy, of a destroying angel, of the averter in the lot, of a lying spirit allowed to entice Ahab's prophets, of Satan provoking David to number Israel, of an evil spirit troubling Saul, of the dragon that God's sword strikes, of Leviathan and the dragon in Egypt's rivers, of the adversary who challenged Job and was refuted by Job's patience. These are not curiosities. They are warnings that my contest is invisible, personal, and purposeful. In the Gospels, the adversary tempts my Lord. Unclean spirits are expelled. Judas opens himself first to a suggestion and then to a possession. The apostles teach me not to give place to the devil, but to arm myself, because I wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, rulers of the darkness, spiritual wickedness in the heavenlies. Ephesians 6:12. These texts teach that enemies I cannot see strategize against me, and that I must not fight naked. Yet I will not say, as the simple sometimes do, that every sin is caused directly by a demon. That would make my nature a puppet and excuse my excesses as if I had no will. No, some evils emerge from within when natural movements are indulged beyond their God-given bounds. The hostile powers seize such moments to widen the breach, but the breach often begins with me. Nature, excess, and the opening demons. Use hunger and thirst arise from my created constitution. No one imagines the devil makes me feel either. Likewise, the sexual appetite awakens at maturity by nature's ordinance. The adversary did not create these movements. He exploits them when I exceed their measure. If I have not yet learned temperance with food, I will overstep. If I do not govern desire, I will slide from impulse into bondage. So too with anger, sorrow, acquisitiveness. Each has a fitting measure. When I indulge a little, passion grows. Coveting matures into avarice. Desire hardens into theft, violence, even blood. Here the hostile powers, finding an open door, inflame and drive, pressing excess toward outrage. Their aim is tyranny over a soul already loosened by intemperance. I have seen how those seized by immoderate love, uncontrollable anger, or crushing grief suffer no less than the demon-afflicted. The same powers that toss the body can, when given lodging, storm the sensitive part of the soul. If I let them settle, they take more than a foothold, they take the field. God limits temptation, my freedom decides the victory. The flesh lusts against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh, and these are opposed to each other, so that you do not do the things you wish. I therefore acknowledge two kinds of struggle. Sometimes I contend as a man with what is merely human, movements of flesh and blood. Sometimes I contend with powers above my measure, principalities and powers. Yet even then Providence presides like a just judge over the games, pairing combatants fairly, never mismatching a boy with a giant. God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way to escape so that you may be able to bear it. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13. This does not mean I will necessarily win. The promise grants capacity, not automatic triumph. The way of escape is given that I may be able to endure. Whether I endure depends on how I use the strength offered. If victory were guaranteed, there would be no contest, no virtue in overcoming. But if a real power to conquer is given to all, and I can employ it either diligently or slothfully, then the victor is rightly praised and the vanquished justly blamed. So I distinguish. Some transgressions arise without any pressure from malignant powers, through negligence with what is natural. Others the adversaries drive beyond measure, once I have yielded the first inch. In every case I ask how they work upon me. Often they do not act by force, but by suggestion, kindling imaginations, casting darts into thought. God grants me power to quench those darts with faith if I will take up the shield. God is faithful, and He gives me a way of escape, so that I may be able to bear the trial. My task is to use with energy the strength He supplies. Otherwise I turn a granted power into a lost battle. 1 Corinthians 10:13, where thoughts come from and how to respond. Not every thought comes from the same source. Some arise from within, some are stirred by hostile powers, some are awakened by God, some are ministered by holy angels. Scripture itself teaches this manifold origin. Therefore I test impulses and recollections. When God stirs my heart, I may still refuse. When an evil spirit suggests, I can still cast it off. Freedom is never cancelled, it is exercised or squandered. I remember how a king's sleeplessness became the occasion for remembering Mordecai's good. God put it into his heart. And how the priests and scribes, moved by the evil one, sharpened their counsel against Jesus. Judas first entertained a suggestion and then welcomed the tempter in. So I guard my heart with all diligence, lest I give place to the devil. Proverbs 4:23, Ephesians 4:27. The devil's fiery darts do not always pierce. Sometimes they only kindle. Let me take up the faithful shield so they are quenched upon impact. Only then do they find no place to wound. Not all at once, spirit against spirit. I do not wrestle against every power at once. Human nature could not bear the simultaneous assault of all adversaries. The church as a whole contends against all. I, as a single athlete, face those opponents. Providence assigns, sometimes one, sometimes several, sometimes this one now and that one later. Even Paul triumphed not by native strength, but because the conqueror dwelt in him. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Philippians 4:13. This is no grappling of bodies, no tricks of the wrestling school. Spirit strives with spirit. Losses, slander, danger, sudden calamity, these are the occasions the adversaries prefer, not for the pain itself, but for the murmuring, doubt, despair, or blasphemy they hope to extract from my wounded heart. Job's story is the template. Permission first, assault next, then inward pressure toward cursing. I answer as my Lord taught, you would have no power against me unless it had been given you from above. John 19:11. Providence over everything, not the author of evil. So I confess a hard but saving truth, many happenings that seem in between, neither obvious blessings nor blatant judgments, do not come from God as their author, and yet none of them come without him. He sometimes permits hostile powers to test, within limits, those whom he is fitting for endurance. Therefore I receive all that happens as within his providence, remembering, are not 2 sparrows sold for a farthing? Yet not one of them falls to the ground apart from your Father. Matthew 10:29. My whole life on earth is a testing, a proving field. I will not call God the maker of evil. I will not call chance my master. I will say, he governs. The adversary rages by permission. I am armed or unarmed by my own vigilance, and the outcome honors either grace diligently used or grace neglected. Augustine, The Confessions, Book 11, Chapter 22, Section 31, Arguments about Formless Matter. If someone objects and says, if you refuse to admit that the formlessness of matter is what Scripture calls heaven and earth, then you are forced to say there was something God had not made, out of which he made heaven and earth. For Genesis never states that God created this matter, unless we take it to be implied in the words heaven and earth, or in earth only, when it says, in the beginning God created heaven and earth. What follows, but the earth was invisible and without form, would then mean that this was the formless matter already in existence. Even so, why may we not understand that when it says God made heaven and earth, it includes that as well? Those who hold this opinion, or the one like it, will answer, we do not deny that formless matter was created by God, the one from whom all things come, who made all things very good. For just as the formed creation is a greater good, so the unformed but formable matter is a lesser good, yet still good. But Scripture does not explicitly say that God made this formlessness, any more than it tells us when he made the cherubim and seraphim, or the thrones, dominions, principalities, and powers the apostle names. We know he made them, but Genesis is silent about the time. The problem of the waters. They will go on. If heaven and earth comprehends all, what of the waters upon which the Spirit of God moved? If these are counted as part of the earth, how can earth mean formless matter when these waters are clearly beautiful? Or if they are included, why then does the text say that the firmament was made out of formlessness and called heaven, but never says the waters were made? For these waters, flowing so beautifully, are not formless and invisible. If they gained their form only when God said, let the waters under the firmament be gathered together, then the act of gathering is their formation. But what of the waters above the firmament? If they were formless, they would not have deserved so noble a place. Yet Scripture does not tell us how they were formed. Why formless matter must still be created. Therefore, if Genesis is silent about something God surely made, let no sober teaching dare to claim these waters are co-eternal with God simply because they are mentioned in Genesis, when we are not told when they were created. Why not, being taught by truth, understand that the formless matter itself, called the earth invisible and without form and the deep covered in darkness, was itself made by God out of nothing? Thus it is not co-eternal with him, even though the narrative does not specify the time of its creation. Thomas Aquinas, Summa Theologica, Part 1-2, Question 2, Article 4. Whether man's happiness consists in pleasure objection. It seems that man's happiness does consist in pleasure, since all men naturally desire delight, and many consider joy itself to be the highest good. Responsio happiness does not consist in bodily pleasure. True pleasure is a kind of rest or fulfillment that follows the possession of a desired good. But happiness itself is not the rest. It is the actual possession of the supreme good, which is God. Bodily pleasures, such as food, drink, or sexual union, are imperfect and fleeting. They depend on the condition of the body and fade quickly once the appetite is satisfied. They cannot be the final end, for the soul craves something lasting and unshakable. Moreover, bodily pleasure is common to both man and beast, but man's happiness must surpass the animal level. Even spiritual pleasures, such as those of knowledge or friendship, are not happiness in themselves, but only accompany the attainment of the highest good. Thus, while happiness brings with it the greatest delight, happiness itself is not identical with pleasure, especially not bodily pleasure. Rather, happiness is union with God, the supreme good, from which true delight flows. Quick Summa. Happiness is not pleasure, but union with the supreme good. Pleasure follows happiness as its fruit. Zach and the feast. Zach was invited to a grand banquet where tables sagged under the weight of food and drink. At first, every bite filled him with delight, and he thought to himself, surely this is joy itself. But as the courses stretched on, the delight dulled. His body grew heavy, and satisfaction slipped away. Looking around, Zach noticed others still eating furiously, chasing pleasure, but never catching it. Then his eyes turned toward the host, seated calmly at the head of the table. The man's face radiated joy, not from the food before him, but from the love he shared with his guests. In that moment, Zach realized the meal was only a sign, a fleeting gift pointing to something far greater, fellowship with the one who gave it. So too with us. Bodily pleasure fades quickly, but true happiness is not in the banquet, but in the friendship of God, from whom all lasting joy flows.